Hello and welcome. I am Erin McGurl, Executive Director of the Bibliographical Society of America, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this event today. It is an information session on the Cambridge University Press Elements series on publishing and book culture. I'm just going to start us off with a few housekeeping items before I hand it over to our speakers. The BSA's office is situated on the ancestral homeland of the Lenape in Brooklyn, New York. And today I am speaking to you from the ancestral homelands of the Nonotuck in the Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. If you'd like to read the BSA's land acknowledgement, I'm going to put a link in the chat, the full land acknowledgement. And we also invite you to share your own in the chat if you wish to do so. Second of all, I want to remind you that this event is being recorded and we will post it to our YouTube channel probably sometime next week or in early February. And that by participating, you agree to abide by the BSA Events Code of Conduct. I've just put a link to that in the chat as well. So today our speakers will present to you, and you are welcome to engage, speak to each other in the chat box on your screen. If you'd like to ask a question, you can submit a question at any time during today's session and they'll be answered at the end. Please do use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. Participants can see all questions and can comment on or upvote questions. And if you do that, it'll help us understand which questions are of most importance to this group so we get to them all today. Yep, okay, that's my script. I'm going to pass things over to Samantha Rayner, the general editor of the Cambridge University Press Elements series in publishing and book culture. Thank you so much to all of you for being here today.
Thank you, Erin. Yes, thank you to the Society for inviting us along to talk about this series, which hopefully by the end of this session, you'll know a bit more about. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the background to the series, and my deputy editor, Professor Lear, who is there as well, is then going to talk through a bit about the different strands and where we're at the moment. And then we're going to hand on to some of the strand editors that we've got on the panel today to talk in a bit more detail about those specific areas. So Lear, are you ready? Good. Panelists, are you ready? Well, yes, good. All right then. So, what is this series, and why should you be interested in submitting some of your research to it? Well, it sits under this thing that Cambridge University Press have called Elements, and there are lots of different subjects that Elements has. It was designed to be a short monograph format for all research areas, and aimed at being published mostly in a digital format, although you can get physical copies of these short monographs printed off. When I put together the initial proposal to CUP for a new series of books around publishing and book culture, Elements hadn't quite landed. And I was persuaded by Linda Bree, one of the main editors at CUP at the time, to consider coming on board with this as one of their first Elements series. And it's been a very interesting process because it is about publishing and book culture. We have run it very much, Lear and I, as a kind of publishing in practice project, along it being obviously a real series. So the conversations that we've had with CUP along the way have been interesting, challenging, sometimes frustrating on both sides, I think. But one of the really positive things that's coming out of this series, and has been all along, is actually that dialogue, that very open and frank dialogue that we've had with the press about the way that people read books, the way that people receive books. And one of the things that I was very passionate about was the fact that if it was going to be a series about publishing and book culture, that actually the aesthetics of what these little books look like was very important to me. I, had to concede that CUP really wanted them to be digital first, but I really believed that people that love books, and in fact, you know, you're going to hear from Cynthia about the book collecting strand, but people who love books like to have books. And I really wanted our series to look good on a bookshelf together. So in a minute, when Lear's going to take you through the strands, hopefully you'll see what we came up with. We use, as you can see in my background, very simple design in the end, but something that actually played into CUP's history. So we're using the ampersand, the Baskerville ampersand, which is part of CUP's own typographic history. And yeah, that we are the only Elements series. If you go on the Cambridge Elements platform, you'll see that all the others have quite, dare I say, quite boring sort of covers. Ours stands out because it is different, and we are the only series that's been allowed to have a different, not just a different design on the covers, but actually our format is different. It's a slightly smaller, squarer printed out version than the other Elements as well, and cheaper. I should put that in as well because that is important. The other Elements are now, I think, retailing at £15.99 or £17.99, and ours come out in the UK at £12.99. So we have won that battle as well. Other battles we have not been so successful in winning, but I can tell you all about those maybe in the Q&A session. So we really wanted to build this series that covered this wide scope of publishing and book culture, and give young scholars, emerging scholars, older scholars just that opportunity to publish and be part of this community. So I'm hoping one of the things also that comes out of this afternoon with the panel that we've got, you know, we do sort of share ideas. There is again this dialogue between editors and authors, and it's been running now for a fair few years, so we can no longer call ourselves a new series. I think we are definitely an established series now, but it is the way that the process runs, the fact that as an author you get that interaction with your strand editor, and Leah and I kind of sit there with advice for the strand editors and also for authors if necessary. So it's a very collegiate and a very accessible process for authors. And CUP, I have to say, have been brilliant in terms of their support and the quickness with which they answer questions. They have been brilliant since day one and remain brilliant. So that for us is also positive. I think Leah, working with the team at CUP, they've always been very responsive, haven't they? So before I hand over to Leah, who's going to tell you a bit more about our different strands, I just wanted to say, you know, it is, you know, it's important these days for things in the UK, for things like the REF, to talk about sort of impact and things like that. So you can go on the website and it will show you the metrics and it will show you the downloads. So just as an example of how wide-reaching the series is getting, Kate Osmond, who I understand is a member of this society, her element on women book collectors, which was published in April last year, has so far, when I checked just before this session, it's had 727 HTML views and 345 PDF views, which is pretty impressive for a, you know, short form monograph. So, you know, you can go on the website and you can see all those figures for yourselves, but it does seem to be reaching people now, which is also, from my point of view as the editor, very good news. So Leah, shall I hand over to you and attempt to share my screen so you can tell people a bit more about the different strands? Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. And I did also think it might be worthwhile just restating in case our audience isn't as clear that well, describing what our form of a short form monograph is, because actually there are lots of different lengths for short form monographs at different publishers as well. So our minimum wordage, including all of your appendices, bibliography, etc., is 20,000 words and a maximum of 30,000 words. So it's kind of a very, very, very sizable article, as it were. But I have seen other short form monographs going up as high as 60,000 words, but ours are quite strictly in that range. So it's just probably worth saying that. And yes, we do have a number of strands, which is not a finite number in that we're always looking for proposals for new strands if we're missing something crucial. We're always interested as well in atypical versions of strands that might not necessarily conform to exactly how all the other ones are working. We're interested in all kinds of innovative ideas about how we take the strands forward. But at the moment, we have 13 strands on the books.
Each one has its own visual identity in that all of them follow the broad design that Sam was describing earlier with the Baskerville ampersand, but they have a visual identity in colour. So you can see our academic publishing strand there has a dark blue background and the ampersand is in a sort of nice grey. The children's publishing strand there has a nice sort of tealy colour and then a different form of grey, etc., etc. We go through and we've got them in various different areas, bookshops and bookselling, you can see there, publishing, the canon, young adult publishing, and I should say Melanie, who you can see in the picture there, Remley Bardash and Bold, would actually be with us to talk to us about her strand today, were she not unfortunately unwell with COVID, as does seem to be an awful lot of people at the moment. It's definitely doing the rounds. So we miss Mel today, but her strand is doing extremely well as well. We've got 21st century booksellers. We've got women publishing and book culture and digital literary culture. So it's very wide ranging, as you can see, editors and editing, typography and book culture, and the business of publishing, and I think we're nearly down at the bottom there, and book history, which actually is a strand that I edit together with Andrew, who you're going to hear from a little later. And Cynthia's also here with us. We've got collecting the book there as well. So you can see the visual identity and colours there. So each little strand has a particular look to it. And actually, if you want to collect these things, they do look rather nice on the shelf together when you get sort of little sections in each colour. It's almost like those little pocket penguins that came out a while ago. So they are a sort of an attractive little book that has a sort of haptic element to them as well. Probably also worth noting that we do have fast turnarounds on getting these things out. We do aim from submission of manuscript to publication to not spend much longer than 6 months in that period, but that still retains a very robust double peer review, double blind process. So it's a robust series, even if it's a short form monograph, and even if the turnaround times for getting these things out there are quite short. And as I say, we are always looking for new strands to add. So there is a proposal form on the website if you're thinking about not just a little element, if you're thinking about something wider that you might even like to become an editor of. And as you can see, each one of these little strands has its own editor that does the kind of author interactions and the advice as those books are coming to press. And we have actually commissioned a huge number now. We are now at 114 commissions across all of our threads there. So actually, I think we're probably also, as well as one of the earliest series on Cambridge Elements, probably one of those prolific ones as well in terms of the numbers of publications coming out. And CUP seem to be pretty pleased with our progress in that sense. So I hope that kind of covers the overview of the strands for everyone. So I'm sure now you'd like to hear a little bit about a couple of the individual strands and what it's like to publish those. So we're going to move over to Nicola Wilson, who's on the call here, is going to talk to you about her strand on women publishing and book culture.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Nicola Wilson. I'm based at the University of Reading, and as you can see, we've got the excellent suffragette colours here of the green and purple. So I think it's a really good-looking strand that I lead. So I came into this a couple of years ago. There was a previous strand editor before me, so I've worked on a few titles over the last few years, and we've got more coming out. So the main idea of the women publishing and book culture strand is to look at the history and futures of women and gender minorities in the book trade and the intersections between feminism, sex and gender publishing and the book. We really welcome different critical perspectives that explore women's variety of book work. And if I just give you a bit of a taster of some of the things that I've worked on particularly, so to give you a sense of the variety of the things that the Strand publishes. We had a great book by DM with us on Virago reprints and modern classics. The subtitle was The Timely Business of Feminist Publishing. So that's obviously looking at one particular feminist publishing house and thinking about the kind of the backlist and reprint market, a kind of quite strong thesis in that sense. We then did, I'm just going to show you up to camera, this is Claire Battersill's Women in Letterpress Printing across the 20th century. So that was an in-depth study of letterpress, written in quite a different way, so framed with an autobiographical opening, thinking about Battlesill's own work with letterpress, and then that kind of looked more broadly at kind of key different letterpress printers in a transnational way across the 20th century. That included quite a lot of images as well, which is something quite nice that the Element series can do. The most recent title that's just come out recently is really different again. Jodie McAllister, Claire Pannell, and Andrea Trinidad's book on publishing romance fiction in the Philippines. Really different, as you see. So we kind of feminist publishing, feminist printing and production. This one is much more around kind of genre publishing and very contemporary, and how women writers are kind of working in kind of collectives and through different kind of digital forms as well. So quite a variety there. And we've got a couple coming out, one on Belle de Costa Green by Deborah Parker, that's kind of coming together at the moment. And the next one is going to be Helen Williams' book on women and romantic bookbinding, and that's going to be interesting, which is it's kind of bringing a craft studies perspective to the art of feminist bookbinding in the romantic period. So again, quite a variety of different types of work, theoretically and historically. I think as an editor, they're really interesting to take in. One of my key roles really is to think about the kind of peer review process and what's going to be most productive for the author in terms of the types of reviews and who we're asking to do those. And I guess just on length, I think it is quite helpful to think of them as a long journal article, because some of the ones I've worked on do have quite a strong thesis as well, kind of an argument. So because it's such a short form. So I think that's quite important as well, really, and how if you're thinking about them as an author. So I'm very happy to answer questions later. I'm going to pass on to Dr. Laura Dietz now, who has a digital literary culture strand.
Nicola, thank you. To the Society, thank you so much for having us to talk about elements. I'm going to, as succinctly as possible, talk about the digital literary culture strand. As you can see in the description, it explores digital formats, yes, like ebooks and audiobooks, but just as much about how print books are written and promoted and retailed and reviewed and sampled and discussed and shared and fact-checked and recommended online. It talks about reading identities and relationship with books, shaped by formats, by networks, and by platforms, and the evolving role of the publisher and the author, but these changing but not disappearing hierarchies and gatekeeping functions. So it's about technologies, but not only that, whether people are talking about customs or policies or assumptions or narratives or defensive position takings, it's very, very inclusive. And to give an idea of the range of things that have appeared in this one so far, the very first book in the series was The Network Turn, about changing perspectives in the humanities, which was co-written by Ruth Einert, Sebastian Einert, Catherine Coleman, and Scott Weingart, on perspectives from librarians, and computer scientists, as well as book historians, and digital humanists, to come together in one volume. Could you find this kind of book elsewhere? Not so much. It's not just the length, as other editors were saying, but just the inclusiveness, I think, that makes it distinctive. Some more recent ones that included On Reading Computer-Generated Text by Leah Henriksen, on the early development of Project Gutenberg by Simon Robury, the pre-web digital publishing and lore of electronic literature by Astrid Enslin, and coming soon are titles about webcomics, bot mimicry, where non-computer generated texts are picking up the aesthetics of that and trying to persuade or masquerade as a non-human made text, about poetry communities and social platforms, and about authorial identity, personal and professional, in the digital sphere. But we're open to, as Leah says, all kinds of interpretations of what this might mean and surprise us. In the time I have left, please cut me off at any moment. Authors might be thinking, if they were considering putting into elements, like, why this instead of something else, but why this strand instead of something else? Many elements that come to us could go into more than one category. I mean, Sam's research on female booksellers, you could put in, in the business of publishing, in the bookselling, or in the, women in publishing kind of areas. Editors sometimes get together and will say, this could go multiple places. Who could do a particularly great job with a particular idea? And I would like to think that we're very generous about saying, please take this fantastic book, and put it into your strand instead of mine. I would like to think so. But this particular grouping, if digital is obviously a component of a huge number of projects, they don't all end up here. It is great. The speed with which elements come out is a great reason to put research here. If something is quite timely and needs to get out soon, you, I think, would struggle to find another place that you could release a book or a short monograph length manuscript as quickly as this, with a complete peer review plan. But it's great, this one, for authors who want to foreground the digital and also want to highlight connections to the study of digital culture in other fields and just the visibility of it. Two examples would be Simon Robury's work on the history of Project Gutenberg is talking about Silicon Valley myth-making in one particular instance, punctured by good old-fashioned archival research. Did Michael Hart, as all the obituaries said, invent the ebook? Probably not. But it highlights its relevance to other kinds of platform studies, other kinds of science and technology studies. The interest in 2023 in Leah Henriksen's book, which came out in 2021 about computer-generated text, as you can imagine, was enormous. It was wonderful to see people looking, inspired by or frightened of ChatGPT, looking for anything about what do people think about the authorship of computer-generated texts. Oh, look, here's some empirical research on what is it written by the program or the bot? Is it written by nobody? But to have people come to that and to be connected to this long history of computer and then earlier machine-generated texts, to be looking at, computer-generated text from the 60s or machine-generated text from the 1840s. It was wonderful to see people frightened by ChatGPT, looking for information, and to hear about book history traditions and book history methods, and not walk away thinking that computer-generated texts were created in 2023 for the first time. I will stop there.
I think it's me next, is that right?
That's right. Thank you, Andrew.
That's right.
I should have said handing
fine.
over to Andrew.
That's fine, Laura. Thank you very much. So the book history strand was actually a relatively late entrant to this collection. And to some extent, that was because Sam and Leah were receiving some high quality proposals that didn't immediately fit into any of the existing topics or themes, but which also had a strong historical focus. And it seemed an obvious thing to create a dedicated strand to book history, but with a strong focus on book and publishing history to fit in with the overall theme of the elements of publishing and book culture. As the strand has emerged, both in terms of the proposals that came in and also the proposals that we've subsequently been able to acquire through once the strand had been created, it seemed as if the strand was developing a number of common interests. The first of which I might say was thinking about publishing conceptually within and across history and locations. One of the most recently published elements in this area was an element on publishing in a medieval monastery by Benjamin Paul, which attempted to think about what publishing as a concept, as a conceptual thing that we use in book history can help us understand medieval monastic production. We also found that the proposals were reassessing elements of publishing practice in different periods, and we have a couple of proposals at the moment that are looking at aspects of publishing in Victorian Britain, one on the professionalization of publishing structures in the Victorian period, and another on Moody's library and the shelf life of the Victorian novel. Those are forthcoming elements. We also discovered that there were a number of proposals that were concerned with new theoretical or thematic approaches to book history, widely conceived, and in particular concerned with different elements of media. And the most recent publication in this strand on communicating the news in early modern Europe explores this by thinking less about the material forms taken by early modern news and more about the movement of news through different media and time and place. In addition to these particular aspects of the strand, as I say, to some extent, the strand is still sort of discovering its identity. We have a sub-series called People of Print. And this was developed by a number of colleagues, including Rachel Stenner of the University of Sussex, who had a common interest in rediscovering and profiling understudied figures in the book and print trades from the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. And Rachel and her colleagues conceived a series of elements that would look at particular centuries and try and profile some of the understudied, underdocumented personalities of print. And a volume on an element on the 17th century has appeared with a collection of short essays by an array of contributors. And there will be follow-up volumes that will cover the 16th and 18th century. It's also my hope that we can extend this into the 19th century and perhaps adapt the model that Rachel and her colleagues have developed to have single studies of single individuals who have perhaps had a considerable influence on aspects of book and publishing history in the 19th century. I'm working at the moment with a potential author on an element on Whitaker, the 19th century publisher. One of the characteristics, I think, of the elements that have appeared so far in this series is that in at least two cases, they have emerged from large-scale funded research projects. The early modern news in Europe is a large EU-funded project, and there's another publication which is forthcoming, arising from the Publication Beyond Print project, which is concerned with thinking about what the concept of publication means in context of manuscript production and circulation. And I think that's an interesting trend, because it shows that this particular method of publication, the element series, is particularly well suited to outputs from these large-scale research projects, especially because of the digital format and the scope for inclusion of multimedia content. So those of you who are working with large-scale research projects might want to consider the series as particularly well suited. We've come to think very much of the monograph or the collection of essays as the standard output for large-scale funded research projects. But increasingly, I think this interim between the article and between the monograph in terms of length, and as Nicola said, in terms of having the kind of strong central thesis of the article, but explored in a broader context that we would normally find in a monograph. This midway ground is actually proving to be extremely conducive to that kind of research project. So I think I'll leave it there, unless Leah wants to add something. She might want to add something at a later point, because we do work on this together. I tend to focus on most of the proposals that come in from the early modern period to the present, and Leah focuses on developing the medieval section of the strand. And as I said, that's a particularly strong area that we want to push, to think about what publishing might mean in contexts that we don't normally think of in terms of publishing before publishing. I think then at this point, I'll pass on to Cynthia, who's going to talk about her strand.
Thanks, Andrew. Can you see me? Have I come up there? I hope. Okay. So this is, collecting the book is a really new strand. We've only published two elements so far, and it's what we're looking at. This is very much it's not quite a subset of the history of the book, edited by Andrew and Leah, but it's really, sorry about that. Well, it's an emerging subject in its own right. And we felt that it was robust enough to have its own strand. Our first two publications reflect the purpose of the series in looking at collecting as a cultural phenomenon. This was very much the case for our first book, which was written by Danielle Magnuson and Laura Cleaver. It is this came out of, as Andrew was talking about in his presentation, a large European funded research project, the Cultivate project, which has just come to a close. This project will generate a multitude of outcomes. And this book fell right in, it came sort of at the beginning of the project from the first tranche of research. And it looked at the trade in rare books and manuscripts between Britain and America circa 1890 to 1929. And it was able to utilize new methodologies and also new evidence to look at this type of collecting, which sort of has the moniker of the golden age of manuscript collecting. And they were able to really shine new light on it in really exciting ways. It was a way to bring together their own thinking as the project emerged and continued. And it was a really useful and exciting thing for both Laura and Danielle to produce at exactly that time as part of this 4-year project. Kate Osmond's book was our second book. This is the one that Sam mentioned at the beginning that has gone very well. Kate looked at the Hrothgar Club, and this is the female version of the Lear Club. And she looked at the impact of this club and also this group of women book collectors in general of the period in the early 20th century. I think one of the things we're interested in is looking at historic book collections, but we're also interested in contemporary collections. So if you're looking at contemporary collections wherever in Europe, in India, in North America, we'd be really interested in hearing from you. Our most recent book that we're bringing through is a book that is looking at the books acquired and accumulated by a female religious community in the late Middle Ages. But I very much want to emphasize that we really want to look across time periods in terms of this cultural practice. And so we very much encourage you to get in touch if your research touches on this subject. And I think that's really it from me. And we'd very much like to open this up to your questions because we're getting into our last half hour. So I'll leave it there.
Hi, I'm going to
Thanks,
moderate
Sarah.
today's Q&A. So I'll just ask everyone to take a couple of minutes to think of your questions and enter them into the Q&A box. And I can start off with a question to all of you for both our audience here today and also for future folks viewing this on YouTube maybe. Can you tell us a little bit about the peer review process and how that works? And for people who might be brand new, maybe this is their first time submitting a monograph proposal and going through that process. How does that work? And do you have any advice for someone who maybe doesn't come from academia? So if a librarian, for example, is interested in publishing, is there something that's maybe in the unwritten code book of academia that you all are aware of that maybe folks who are coming from outside of scholarly culture maybe don't know about?
Thanks, Erin. Shall I start this one off and the rest of you chip in because I'm bound to forget things. And thank you for raising that point because yes, I should have said one of the foundational principles behind this series was to hope that we would get people that aren't necessarily academics coming forward. So yes, librarians. We have got, I think, one published by a bookseller in the bookselling strand. So, and we've managed that. So yes, it's a slightly different process, but that is partly why I said about the community. In terms of peer review, you know, you have us here. We are here to help. So whatever stage of your career you're at, whether you're an academic or a non-academic, your first port of call would be either me or Lear or your strand editor or all of us. The manuscripts go through a sort of journal platform called Scholar One, which some of you might be familiar with from other journals that you submit to. So that helps with the speed of things and helps us to keep sort of tabs on where things are at. What we have got in place is a sort of informal pre-submission to that platform option where you can send your manuscript, first of all, to the strand editor, who will give it a read through and give you some immediate feedback. So the idea there is that if you're a bit lacking in confidence, you would get alerted to the fact that there might be some major changes that you might, you know, they would give you that advice. So you'd have a chance to put those right before it then gets put into the system proper when it goes off to the double blind review. So that's there to sort of help people to actually learn a bit about the academic publishing process and be a little bit more secure about it before it goes and you get the scary, you know, reports back. But as editors, we kind of what's the word, not negotiate, you know, manage that system for you. So we work with the authors to make sure that, you know, the feedback that you get from the blind peer reviewers is kind of mediated. That's what I mean. And you would get support from the strand editors as well to help you with those changes. Leah, have I forgotten anything about the peer review process?
I don't think so. I mean, it's one of the benefits of our series is that the form is actually in itself quite short in terms of what it asks for in the first instance. So it's actually quite an accessible form as well. So if you are coming from outside of the academy, I think most people could find something to put in there. We only ask for a very short blurb about the book. We sometimes do have questions when the proposals first come in and we go back for additional information. But actually that first step is not a kind of 20-page document. It's a couple of pages maximum. And most of that is actually answering some particular questions that are set out in the form. So, you know, it's not a blank page scenario. So I think that's important to say. We do view the process as supportive as we can make it. So, you know, we do encourage you, if you've already got something written, you can send that as a sort of initial stab to the strand editor to say, you know, is this looking like something? I think people are always happy to look at drafts before you even submit a proposal if you're ready to do that. And even after your proposal has been actually accepted to go forward, you can, of course, you know, talk to your strand editor as you're writing and check that things are going in the right direction as well. So you can see them as there's a kind of conversation you can have before the submission, before it even goes out to those peer reviewers. We usually would say if we felt like it wasn't ready for peer review, if there were any questions before it actually goes. So whilst we say we aim for 6 months, you know, we would obviously tailor that 6 months if an author needed extra time for whatever reason, if something wasn't developing quite right, if it needed further advice along the way. So that's the aim. We're pretty good at making that, assuming peer review is good and all of those kind of things, but we're open to it having to take longer if it needs to as well.
Thank you so much for that. Does anyone have any questions in our audience? Here's a couple. Great, thank you. So this is from Malcolm Noble. I've noticed a couple of edited collections in the elements. Would anyone care to say a little more about the parameters of the edited collections, length, number of chapters, etc.?
Andrew, do you want to take this one as you're the editor that's probably handled? And Leah as well. We had experience. We've got one coming through, I think, haven't we? So yeah, Andrew, if you can answer that one.
Yeah, I can do. The press is actually quite clear that it doesn't publish or doesn't want to publish edited collections within the Element series, which doesn't mean that it's not open to multi-authored elements. Now, that might lead in some instances, and indeed it has in the case of the volume that I talked about, Communicating the News in Early Modern Europe, to a title page which has a large number of names on it. And the same also with the People of Print series. Now that might be something that's a little bit different, perhaps that takes a little bit of getting used to. So they're not edited collections as such, but they are multi-authored books. The People of Print series, it consists of very short chapters, and it's specifically designed in that way. And we would welcome a proposal for something similar, but it would be considered very much on its own terms. We don't present that as a model that we actually want to follow. The other examples of the multi-authored books are very much the same as any other element. They are a single 25 or 30,000 word piece broken down into sections, of course, but without any clear indication of authoring of individual sections. I hope that helps. I mean, Sam and Lear are probably better placed to actually sort of interpret the press's views on this.
Well, we are pushing that envelope. Remember at the start I said this was a part of sort of publishing in practice project. Leah, I don't know how much you can say about the proposal that's come in fairly recently for editions. Can we say anything about that at the moment?
Yeah, that's a slight. We've had a proposal, or it's on its way. I think we've had notice that a proposal might come in for a slightly innovative new strand, which would include editions of, and this is again a medieval thing, but of editions of short Latin manuscripts with a kind of a sort of study that focuses on the publishing and book historical elements of those. It's quite unusual. That's a bit different again from an edited collection because it is more kind of author-led, if you see what I mean. But there is a sort of edition section in there, which would be quite different. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be proposed in the sense of being something that would be used in teaching quite a lot, actually.
Yes.
And that's the kind of major output for it. We've not run it by CUP yet, that one, because the proposal hasn't actually arrived yet, but it may well be one that we have to spend some time in kind of articulating exactly how we see this as a fit to the series, because yeah, it's not exactly how Elements and our series in Elements was actually designed from the outset, but we do try to push those new and innovative ideas. I think this one's got legs potentially, but it's not straightforward. So, you know, don't be afraid to come forward with those new ideas. We do actually fight the good fight if we think they're going to fit. We don't always win the fight, but sometimes we do. But yeah, I think it is, Andrew is absolutely right that CUP really don't like the idea of a straightforward edited collection, just a small one. It's kind of, there are multi-author things, and you might even have a lead author within that, but they're not editing the other authors in that sense, if I hope that kind of draws the distinction between the ones we have been able to go ahead with and the ones we haven't.
I'll pose the next question from Jolie Braun. If we have an idea, but it's not clear which strand it would be part of, would the first step be to contact Samantha Rayner? Yes.
Yes, it would.
Excellent.
Or Leah Tether, or both of us. It's a very discursive thing. If it comes to me, I tend to discuss it with Leah first, or vice versa. If it comes to both of us, we have a look. We send it out to the relevant strand editor to have a look at. And if they say they like it as well, then we take it as a group to Bethany at CUP, who's our main editor there. So we like to have that argument and that defense in place before we give it to Bethany. And I don't think we've ever had a disagreement from the press about a proposal that we've put forward. It just works better that way. If she's happy that we've all kind of said we'd like to take it forward, I honestly don't think that we've had one that she said no to, that we've said, can we publish this, have we? No.
Well, we've been all agreed.
I
mean, sometimes we've gone to them with ones that are a bit borderline, and then they'll sometimes say, you know, I don't think we should be going ahead with this. But mostly if we are agreed, they support that agreement.
Yeah.
And perhaps just to add that the press are quite helpful on titles and define, because I guess they've got a clear sense of markets or readership, so they've been helpful, I think, on that sense. Perhaps you know, we love our subtitles, don't we? And perhaps kind of clarifying things like that.
Yes.
I really do like tidy titles for this series in particular. And you know, we're not necessarily all very good at that, but they are actually quite brilliant. They're proposing better titles. They come back with things and think, wow, I wish I thought of that. That's actually excellent. So that's actually really good.
Yeah.
We have another question here. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, but Also, if you want to send, sort of an exploratory idea to one of us editors, that's great too. And then we'll, take it to Sam and Leah and discuss it that way. I mean, it's very, it's a very convivial way to discuss proposals. And we encourage that as well.
So there's another question here from John McQuillan. And he says, the series seems to be much more focused on concepts rather than material bibliography per se. Are you not interested in such proposals? And what are the options / restrictions on images in publications?
Oh, good question, John. We're interested in anything that comes under the publishing and book culture, and I think Cynthia's done a good job about emphasizing that just because some of the titles that have come out at the moment might seem to be more historically based, we are definitely we are open to new ideas from wherever they come. So yeah, please do send in anything that isn't concept based. The other positive about the series is that, as I said, it's designed to be primarily put on this digital platform. So in terms of images, and I've just had this question come up from an element that's coming through at the moment, which is, I think it's coming under your series, Andrew, on doodles in books. Well, that's book history, I think, isn't it?
I've not come
Andrew,
across
Andrew's
doodles in books. Am I frozen?
Maybe it's not book history.
It's
no,
not
you're
a book
back
history
now.
one.
It's okay.
Sorry. No, it's not.
It's
It's not a book history.
Okay.
I haven't come across doodles from you as yet.
Okay. We have an element coming through on doodles in various books. And that was a question from the authors. It's a jointly authored book. They wanted, obviously, because it's about doodles, how many images can they put in? The answers come back from the press. Actually, 30 is probably, the most that you want to put in the actual book if it's going to be printed off and given to you. You can have color, you can submit color images, because obviously the book, when it's published online, can take color. If they're printed out, it's a hard copy of the book, they'll come out in black and white. But the Elements platform itself that sits behind all these books has the capacity for you to upload whatever you like. So images in particular, additional bibliographies, teaching ideas around the books. We've had blog posts, and Laura's done, there's a video up on the website with talking to Simon Robury, the element that she mentioned about the element there. But yes, you can get round the 30,000 word limit in terms of images and other stuff if you can think about dividing it into what you want actually in the element itself and what could be uploaded to the platform. Does that
help,
make
Sam?
sense?
It's the doodles thing. It wasn't an individual element. It was actually a thread on doodling. So
oh,
a strand.
Oh,
so
that's why.
different doodling books.
I think that's weekly. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Hopefully.
I think that might be everything we have. Are there any more last minute questions from our audience today? All right. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening for you, midday for me in New England. This has been just so informative, and I know that the folks here today have a lot to think about and come away with. I'm sure you're going to be hearing from folks, and also that this will be on YouTube for the future. So I hope that people watching this someday are also realizing how accessible and exciting this series is, and will fill our world with lots of publishing and book culture scholarship. So thank you once again. I hope to see lots of you, our speakers and our audience alike, at Bibliography Week events next week. If you haven't seen the schedule, it's up at bibliographyweek.org. Virtual events, in person. If you're in New York, please join us. If you're not, you can attend from afar, and we'd love to see you. So thanks again to everyone, and have a great, go get your glass of wine, folks in England.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Erin. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.